Okay, so here's my demo of what I've been working on. It's going to be an action-oriented, top-down, tile-based sandbox. Um, Everyone has made their decisions on whether they want to use a sprite and just instantiate a whole bunch of objects, but a lot of people have said that is inefficient. However, they all say go to TileAtlas, but there's almost very little information on a TileAtlas. I've done a lot of research. Kool-Aid talks about it, but never really truly goes into it. Sebastian League skips over it completely and designs something a little differently. But overall, I think I found the best mix of what I think a tile should work with, and here's what I've come up with. So I have a world object, and I have my chunk manager script attached to it. Its script is pretty much designed to split up a large mesh into manageable chunks that meet the maximum vert requirements that Unity has. So a Unity mesh can only be, I think, 64 something thousand verts, which is pretty easy to hit. I've noticed that I'm able to build about a 126 by 126 tile per mesh. Anything more than that, and I start hitting the cap. So I've just went ahead and split my meshes into 126 by 126, and I have a 5 by 5 chunk of each one of those being spawned. It attaches my texture 2D, which is listed as a sprite, which currently is just this. This is going to be considered a mountain, but for now I just have a black texture. I created some generic art. It sucks. Ignore me. Then I tell the chunk manager how big my tiles are in relation to the actual texture. So it knows that each 128 bits of a texture or each 128 pixels of a texture is one tile. And then I have it set to padding, so that way with Unity's bitmap system, you don't start seeing annoying lines from it trying to sample a part of the tile that it doesn't or it shouldn't be sampling. I'm currently using Sebastian League's noise class. He has a really good tutorial on generating procedural caves, tiles, and whatnot. And I liked the way he did his noise class, so I went ahead and used his instead of having to redesign the wheel. The way the world works right now is I have it set to build a 2D array of actual tile data, and each tile data can contain the type of tile it is. And then from that, my map mesh will go and look at that tile data, generate a mesh, generate a collision, and then map the UVs. The refresh button goes through and just rebuilds the entire map and then refreshes the UVs and then refreshes the collision. So to give you an idea, I have a 5 by 5 chunk. We'll go ahead and generate the tile map, generate the mesh, and you'll see that I generated a pretty big mesh that's pretty well managed and split up. As you can see, all of the red lines indicate that that's where one of the objects are. So that's one chunk. You'll also notice that all my mountains are surrounded by a lighter color. The lighter color is actually my collider. Instead of generating a tile for the entire mountain, indicating that the whole mountain's impassable, a player should only ever encounter the outside wall of a mountain until he digs in. So as he digs in, the collider will rebuild based off of how far they dig in. But in the meantime, I only need to build a collider for the outside edge. So my algorithm goes through and verifies how many tiles are around each spot, and if there's less than 8 tiles, then that means that needs to be a collider. If there is 8 tiles around it, then that means there's a complete complete wall, and therefore don't build a tile. So it generates a pretty impressive map, and like I said, this is roughly 630 by 630, I think, where that's about 390 something thousand tiles, which is a very large tile map. I don't quite know how big RimWorld works with, but this is a lot. To be an example, I assume that the collider would take a lot of time to instantiate and destroy. The way I'm destroying it is probably very bad. I'm using the destroy immediate to make sure it works in the editor, which realistically I more than likely should not be destroying. I should be just taking the mesh data, and instead of destroying the whole object, just opening the object back up, reassigning a new mesh, and I think that might be faster, but I'll have to do some tests on that. But to give you an idea, as you can see here, there's no real lines. All the tiles have clean. I mean, obviously they're crappy textures, but they're clean. They're not all mapped out. Now, to give you an idea how fast this refreshes, so this is, like I said, a 5x5 chunk. We'll hit refresh, and you'll see it's generating an entire map very quickly. And that's redoing collisions, new UVs, and everything, and redoing the noise. So noise is running, collisions running. The mesh map making part is not being redone every time. Since I already know how big of a mesh I need, all I need to do is just remap the UVs to the mesh. So realistically, all I'm doing is regenerating an entire new map data based off of noise, redoing the UVs, and regenerating a collision mesh based off the map data. So every time I refresh, it's not got nearly as much overhead as I expected. So I can actually refresh pretty fast with a lot of map data, and it's not hurting. Now, there are obviously a lot more optimizations to do. Realistically, I need to go and change the way I'm destroying the collision mesh. I also need to do a lot more data building inside my map, because realistically I have water, sand, grass, mountain. 4 items. That's all it's doing. And that's really not a lot. I need a lot more data being put in these tiles. But each of these tiles work. And to give you an idea, let me go ahead and minimize that. Go to the player. Let's go ahead and move the player around. So we'll move the player like right here. We will go ahead and move it out. We'll hit play. You'll get to see my crappy little sprite animation. Yay. Now, right now I have the map zoom way more than it should be. This was just for testing purposes. Realistically, you probably won't be more than this. But you can see it moves around, and I have full-on mesh collision, so I can't actually bypass these mountains. Now, my next step is obviously to build some form of interaction between it to destroy that map data, and have callbacks set up that anytime that map data changes, to come back and rebuild stuff, specifically collisions and UVs. But for the most part, everything seems to run well. It's hitting 30, 40 frames a second because I have, hold on, I'll show you. If you go to quality, it currently has VSync on every VBlank. If I don't sync, I'm hitting 3,000, almost 3,000 frames a second, 26 to 27. And I have no problem running this. Even when I'm zoomed all the way out like this, I'm still running 26, 27,000 frames. That's a lot of frames for as big as how much data I'm putting on the screen. Now, like I said, you see all these little lines right now because with me zoomed out this far, map is overly trying to sample the textures. I probably need to up my padding a little bit more, but realistically, they shouldn't be zoomed out that much. They should be zoomed out more than maybe this, and that should be fine. But other than that, let me know what you think.